Okay, we are back on with not. Excuse me. I always fumble right at the start, don't I? We're back on with Mystery Boot Camp. We're going to call this one How to Write a Mystery Show. This is our sort of TV boot camp that's going to take you all the way from idea to finished draft of a brand new pilot script, if I can get my words in the correct order. We are part of Script Camp, which is our server that runs lots of free and low-cost classes to help you reach your life goals. We have many other class servers in the Skill Camp family, such as Word Camp, which has novel writing classes, which we just finished. Our Novel Boot Camp, a 12-week course to take you all the way through writing a brand new book. We just wrapped that one up, so within the next couple weeks, we'll be holding some one-off events on Word Camp before we start our new Novel Boot Camp. We also have many other servers, which you can see here. We're still building some of these over time and adding more classes and events, but we have weekly recurring events right now in Game Camp. That's going to be game design Wednesdays at 6 to 8 p.m. And then, as you can see right here, we also have Film Camp, Creator Camp, Toon Camp, and many more, which are just sort of organized around different skills and interests. So there will be announcements, usually on Script Camp, about new stuff that's coming out on these other servers.
What
Go
is
ahead.
Creator Camp? I apologize. I just want to know before you move on to a different subject. What is Creator Camp?
Creator Camp is for content creators like YouTubers.
Oh, I do that. So I haven't seen content. I mean, I haven't seen Creator Camp come up yet.
Yeah, I think we've only had one or two classes on there so far, but we will be adding more over time.
Okay.
All right, so I am mostly a feature writer with about 12, 13 years of experience. Moved to LA in 2015. I think most folks here know me by now. I have had a couple of scripts set up in Hollywood, nothing actually produced yet, but have some announcements to make soon, hopefully, about some stuff that was set up recently. And I have also written on TV shows like Creepshow for the Shudder network, mostly doing rewrites in the horror thriller space, but I also write things like action, dark comedy, westerns, all kinds of stuff. You can enroll in this bootcamp if you haven't already and you want to make sure to be in the rest of these classes. Then you can go to scriptcamp.net, and at scriptcamp.net you can either sign up for membership or you can get a class on its own if you want to at scriptcamp.net/classes. But membership for unlimited at the unlimited level is only $29 a month and includes access to all of the boot camps, all of the labs, the advanced labs, classes on Word Camp, Film Camp, Code Camp, etc., exclusive Discord channels, video library access, which has recordings of all the previous events, and big discounts on things like consultations and proofreads. Okay, so we are in week 0 this week, and week 0 is what we sort of call our introductory class session. And in this one, we're going to address questions like, what is a mystery in the first place? How does a mystery work, and how are we basically using this concept of entertaining questions to drive a story forward? And this week we will have some chances to workshop your series and pilot loglines. So we like to look at this as the head start week. So if you have some early version of the idea for your show, you maybe only know a couple things about it, or you only have the bare essentials of the premise nailed down. Today is a fine time to share what you have and either get steered down the right direction if you feel like you're maybe a little off course, or if you have several different ideas that you're trying to choose between, then we can help you settle on one that works well, or refine an idea that you already have to make sure that everything's working as it needs to be. So I would have your sketchbook open and just be working on those early versions of your loglines today until we get to about the halfway mark through the class. That's when we usually share and give feedback on those. So the following weeks, you can see the outline for here. For those who have been in boot camps before, you guys know the drill by now. We're going to start with the first half of the course, focusing on just planning out the entire script, so you do not have to download screenwriting software if you've not already done that until 3 weeks have gone by. So it's a 6-week course. At the halfway mark, you actually put your pen to paper and start writing those pages. But the first 3 weeks are all about figuring out what the show is, or I guess 4 weeks if you count our head start. We're figuring out what the show is, who the characters are, the outline of the story. So we're trying to line up all your story beats and then expand those story beats into a set of what we call scene cards, which are going to basically be a really comprehensive roadmap to work you through the entire script. So you're going to have a pretty good idea of what's happening on every page, before you start writing. We're going to approach this in a very analytical and planning-focused kind of way. We don't do any of the, just write and see what happens kind of stuff. When you're writing for TV, you have to be able to organize yourself and work within a deadline and work within the framework of whatever show it is that you're writing for. In this case, it's your own. But you have to approach it with a lot of discipline and careful planning. You can't really color too far outside the lines on TV just due to the strict natures of the format. All right, so you can see that I'm not going to go over every single one, but you can see everything that's coming up here. Story Engine is next week, and we're going to wrap up with loglines. So you basically have 2 weeks to get those loglines really down. And in any case, the earlier that you get those down, the sooner that you can move to that next step. And that progression of steps goes from sketchbook, loglines, story beats, scene cards, pages. Okay, and we will also be looking at one-sheets in this course, which we've added to the recent courses just because there's not a lot of emphasis on these, and there's not a lot of instruction out there on how they actually work. And I think they're a really useful tool to get yourself organized and really know your story. So we will also be doing one-sheets on week 2. Okay, so this time we decided to focus our bootcamp, or start focusing the bootcamps around certain genres. It's okay if you're not writing these genres because there are certain things that we can learn from or take from them, or take from this, just topic of discussion, even if you're not writing in that specific, mold. So we're talking mystery, so it doesn't mean you have to be writing mystery because all storytelling uses elements of mystery, mystery being one of the primary reasons that people read, because we don't know the answer to certain things, like how will the events of the story play out. We also are reading for certain other questions. Just certain types of information can act as those breadcrumbs that draw your audience through the whole story. There are certain genres, like what we have a Lindelof quote here, Lost is like a sci-fi mystery show. It's really, really, really formed, the structure of it is really formed around the tentpoles of these huge questions. The whole thing is sort of driven by characters trying to find out the answer to stuff. And once we wrap up those answers, often they lead to new questions. And once you start to ask those questions, then they lead to more. And that's the sort of very, very famous, Lindelof and J.J. Abrams mystery box style storytelling. The way that it unfolds, we have a sort of simple central question like, what is this island and how did we get here? Or it could be something like, we like to frame even complex mysteries around pretty simple questions if we can. Something like Watchmen, which is a pretty complicated story, has this really simple mystery at the heart of it, which is who killed the comedian? And that is kind of what drives the characters deeper into the conspiracy and gets them peeling back the layers of things. And like I mentioned, questions lead to more questions. So it's helpful to have this really clearly defined central question that is sort of the very foundation of the plot. The entire story hinges around characters that are presented with this question, which often comes with a sense of urgency and immediacy to it. It's going to be not just something unimportant. What's the difference between a mystery and a question is that a mystery is an interesting question. And so we have to kind of imagine that solving this needs to have personal stakes for your characters, or at the very least, if it's just their job to solve case after case, then there's a couple different ways that you can draw us into that sort of story too. We will look at those different approaches. That's called the procedural style of mystery, where every episode your characters are faced with another small question that by the end of that episode is resolved. And usually the killer is caught in a satisfactory sort of way is the expectation of the genre, but it doesn't always have to play out exactly like that. Okay, so let me stop rambling and get back to the structure here. So we're going to start with what makes a good mystery show. Types of driving questions, setups and payoffs, plot twists, chain of clues, suspense, and then at the end we will have time to look at your loglines and pitches for your ideas for your mystery shows. Okay, let's go into it. So, we have lots of different subgenres of mystery. I mentioned mystery is a story that is driven by questions and by characters looking for information. We're trying to resolve a simple central question. It's like a tongue twister. Whether that is going to be one question we're trying to solve per season, one question we're trying to solve per, and that would be a show like Fargo, kind of, right? One question we're trying to solve per show, like Lost. What is this island? What's going on here? Or it could be a mystery, or our show could be driven by questions that are asked on an episode-by-episode basis, such as, who's the killer this week? If it's a crime of the week or a monster of the week or something like that, a curse of the week, things like Supernatural or whatever it is like this, we're going to have a beginning, a middle, and an end to that mystery that's resolved. Everything's tied up in a bow by the end, and we get the sense that there will be many more such interesting questions and cases to be found in this world. But critical to the story engine of mystery shows is that sense that there are more mysteries out there. So you kind of want, in this sort of show, it's helpful, like often the setting kind of becomes the star. Think of even like a kid-focused mystery like Gravity Falls. The setting becomes a distinct character because in a world where we're wrapping up a new question every week, it helps if you're in a place that just feels like it is full of interesting questions. That's why the sort of subgenre of this small town is so chalk-ass full of dark secrets is like a real mainstay of British TV. It's like 50% of British crime shows are just about this small town is so full of dark-ass secrets. But in any case, having that setting sort of take central stage makes a lot of sense in TV. Think of the island of Lost, or the island from Lost, or like the any of these Twin Peaks, right? It's just themed around a place that is sort of a generator of unlimited mysteries. Shows like From is that on NBC? They're all centered around like this idea of building out the place as a character in and of itself. So that can be really useful in TV. Fargo is like sort of like that, but it's a little bit deceptive because most of the show doesn't actually take place in Fargo. Mostly takes place in Bemidji for some reason. But in any case, so let's look at some different subgenres of mystery. We mentioned procedurals, which are going to usually take place in that work-type setting, so the characters that are solving mysteries because it's their job for whatever reason. That could be because they are monster hunters, or because they are cops, or detectives. These are really, really, really common. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with this type of show. And in these, the objective is almost always to write a show that can be picked up anywhere. We don't need to watch them in order. There's going to be a crime of the week that is resolved satisfactorily by the end of an hour, or sometimes half an hour in the kind of like more comedic vein. We have cozy mystery, which is going to kind of harken back to the world of the Agatha Christie, the whodunits and things like this. Murder, She Wrote, Death on the Nile, Miss Fisher's. Anytime it's blank person's names, mysteries, or detective agency or something like that. Usually we're going to be in the world of cozies, where they act like procedurals, except the detectives are usually not professionals. They are more likely amateurs of some kind, or like a book club of ladies who all get together and solve murders, because there's like someone that gets killed every single week in their village for some reason. And the tropes are a little bit different in that we don't really see a lot of violence. You sort of just like stumble on the body and maybe there's like a knife on the floor or something like that, but we don't really linger on the gory violence. This ain't Hannibal. It's like sort of more gentle. You suggest the violence. You don't really see people get killed on screen. And also, it's not that scary. And usually they have this really strong sense of wrapping everything up by the end. So try not to leave any loose threads hanging. It's cozy in that we want to kind of buy into the fantasy of, little Miss Mongoose wrapped it up this week and caught the bad guy, and there's not going to be more danger that comes from that. We have detective, that's going to be in that darker vein of things like Silence of the Lambs, the Thomas Harris novels like Hannibal Rising and things like this. Dragon Tattoo, Seven, anything where you have somebody playing, weird twisted games with the police. Things like The Mentalist really focus on characters like this. Psychological thriller are going to be stories that don't always feature protagonists that are very reliable. What's the better way to phrase that? We have the character's psychology is in question, or a major factor in the storytelling in some way. That could be because you have a character whose sanity is somehow compromised, or their perception is somehow compromised, or it could simply revolve around your character sort of facing off against villains or situations in which the psychology of those characters comes into question. Things like, I just mentioned The Mentalist, but any of these sort of crime shows about, like, he's the perfect crime fighter because he can analyze people's body language, or he can analyze people's eye movement, or he can tell when you're lying, or he can, any of these where we sort of have a detective psychologist type character that can, see the design of the killers or whatever it is. We have noir, which is not a very common TV genre nowadays. This is kind of considered antiquated, and it will always get brought back in various ways, but noir is this very detective-focused genre rooted in, 1930s nihilism and this sense of being, you have your lone detective character up against overwhelming darkness and odds stacked against them. You're just one little, spark of light against the overwhelming gloom, kind of overpressing, or sort of oppressive atmosphere to it. And also really defined imagery that you might recognize in terms of, like, the spotlight in the alleyway and the misty streets and all these kind of very well-defined images that are just linked with noir. The Venetian blinds that let in these these slices of light into the smoky office and things like this. And certain character archetypes, too. Noir is kind of like Westerns in that it's like a big bundle of tropes, and you don't need all of them, but if you pick enough of them, then we consider it to belong to that genre. We have paranormal. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to ask it before I forgot.
Sure.
Can you combine different genres?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's some of the best ways to look at this are, like, these are different options, and you're sort of like scooping different stuff onto your tray, but you don't have to stick exactly to one thing. And sometimes the best flavors will be a combination of two of these things that make us see them both in a new way. So yeah, you definitely can mix it up.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I'd love to see some combinations of these that we've never seen before. I think, like, what would a horror cozy mystery look like? How could it be horror and cozy? I wonder. Maybe the protagonist is a monster that solves crimes? Not sure. So, yeah, you can always think of new fun ideas from mixing these up.
A long time ago, I came up with a concept of a crime fight, it's not crime fighting, but a judge who was also a vampire, or a lycanthrope, and maybe does vigilante justice, being the vampire. So those people, get their blood sucked.
That sounds cool. Could be good. Sort of reminds me of Daredevil. How after hours he serves up his own justice when he can't make it work in the courtroom.
Oh, that's right. I forgot he was a lawyer. Okay, thanks for answering my questions.
Sure. 1 second. Let me fix I have a plug that has come out of the back of my computer. Just need to fix this. Okay. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. So, just to round out our sort of subgenres, we have paranormal, which is going to include things like your supernatural, anything where you have characters that are uncovering some sort of cult conspiracy, like your Lovecraftian sort of subgenres. We have horror, which are going to, like, horror is actually really linked to mystery in that most horror storytelling features a strong central question. Often that question is something like, what is this monster and how do we defeat it? Espionage are going to be linked to spying, spies, assassins, things like this with international stakes or politics involved, things like Alias or James Bond. And then last we have what are, kind of loosely called ontological mysteries, which are mysteries about the essential nature of the world that they're in, such as where am I, who am I, what's going on here, what is this place? Alice in Borderland is a good example of this kind of storytelling. Although some people really don't like how few answers these shows end up giving by the end. Sometimes they start with some big questions and we end with those questions still unresolved, which some viewers might be turned away from. Okay, so what else? Let's look at dramatic questions. So we've got big dramatic questions and we've got smaller ones. Our bigger ones are going to be the questions that are sort of powering the entire show. So we're watching many seasons potentially of TV of characters trying to figure out the answer to this thing. And then we have smaller questions, too, which are going to be the question of the episode, or even of the scene, or of the act. And those smaller questions are going to be what you use to simply provide that fuel for the drama, moving us through the episodes. So when you ask an interesting question, the audience will want to know an answer, which is why so often you can frame a question at the very start of a story by simply how would I frame it? Withholding that information. Think of the start of Scream. At the beginning of Scream, I know it's a movie, not a TV show, but we have this long sequence of Drew Barrymore's character getting stalked by this killer. Then she gets murdered by the killer after about a 20-minute chase. And then the last moments before the title comes up, she reaches up, she grabs his mask and pulls it off. And as she does, the camera turns away. Why does the camera turn away like that? To frame the whole movie on this question of, who is this person? Who is Ghostface? So by setting up a question in the cold open is often going to be how TV shows pull this off. We start with, your CSI type procedural is going to start with a murder happening. and we don't reveal who the killer is. Or if we do see who the killer is, there's something else that doesn't quite add up about it, right? We're going to be left with some question beyond just, or we're going to be left with a question that is sort of aching to be answered. Something that doesn't fit, something that seems impossible. If it's a supernatural show, it might be something that, literally isn't possible. How could that person have been murdered when no one else was in the room? It's just a common version of this question. Or we have this really common trick where it'll be like we start the episode, someone's running down an alley, and then they get caught at the end and they turn around and they're like, oh, it's you, but we don't see who you is. And then we hear a gunshot and the person drops dead to the ground, and then the killer approaches and instead of robbing them, leaves something next to them, like a clue or a card or a key or some mysterious token or something like this, right? So we have an initial situation that is, we have an expectation of how we think it might go, and then by the end of that, our expectation is subverted and we're left with a piece of information that is an unknown. Well, why did they do that? Who was that person? Why did they get killed? How did that killing actually happen? And if not a human, what entity actually even did that? So the first few minutes of a mystery, especially on TV, are a great place to hint at what this larger dramatic question would be. And if it's a show with this huge question that's going to pervade the entire thing, you can start with some version of that, right? Or you can also ease us a little bit more into those questions. But the introduction of those questions is going to be one of those key things to hook your audience early on. So the protagonist's goal is going to be to resolve this question. And if your character feels like they don't want to resolve the question, you probably have the wrong protagonist and need to rethink what is their connection to what's happening here. We see all different types of versions of this. Everything from one of my family members was one of the ones that was kidnapped or killed by the killer, is a very common way in. It's my job is a way that you can get them to want to resolve the question. It's not as personal or pressing, but it can work. And sometimes the case gets more personal once they get invested in it. In the sort of true detective genre this true detective mold is all about this. We have characters that are solving a mystery, and the way that bounces off and interferes with their personal lives, and the way that it affects their personal lives for years before, during, and after the case. That's kind of the heart of true detective. So you can absolutely, that we mentioned mixing genres. That is a detective genre mashed up with drama. So it's very interested in the detectives' personal lives as well. So movies typically shouldn't really have more than one central question, and a strong TV show will usually also, there's so many different ways of approaching it, but if you have a larger overall mystery, if you can boil it down to a simple sentence, like, what is this island? Who killed Laura Palmer? Who killed the comedian? Something like this that kind of acts as that, bookend, and we start the story by asking this question, and it may lead to other questions, but we usually end the story by resolving that first question. So you want to sort of typically unveil your questions in descending order of importance, starting with A, your A story, then B, then C, and then you're going to wrap them up in reverse order. So you're going to resolve C, then B, then A. Even really complicated, multifaceted mysteries are usually framed around simple questions. I think I've covered that. Okay, so let's look at some driving questions here. Maybe you guys can mention a show and tell us what is the driving question. I'm just going to pick one. I've already talked too much about Lost on this list. Let's look at a different one. How about Severance? The central driving question of this show is sort of, what is this company and what are they up to? Because it's nothing good. All right, somebody else shout out. What's a show and what's the simple question at the heart of it?
Perry Mason.
Okay, what's the question of that show? I haven't seen it.
Who killed the baby?
Who killed a baby?
Yeah, it starts off with a baby died.
Wow, that's very dark.
Yeah, it's the son of a couple, and it turns out that son is the illegitimate son of a childless tycoon.
Oh,
It just snowballs. It was basically a kidnapping ransom gone bad, mixed with a cult.
Wow, mixed with a cult? What a mess.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It just got canceled, but too complicated maybe.
All right, thanks for that. Wow, that is quite an urgent mystery, I would say. High stakes, very dark. Someone else have one for us? Tell us the show and what's the central question?
Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, and it's who stole the lightning bolt and framed Percy Jackson for it.
Oh, he's framed. Okay, so he needs to clear his name.
Yep.
That adds some good urgency. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Can I just post my log line in the text
You,
in the chat? I mean,
I would just wait until we are all posting them because I'm going to lose track of it in the chat if you post it now.
oh, okay. All right. That's fine.
Okay, you can post it at the halfway mark of the class, which will be in half an hour.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for that. Somebody else want to shout out a show and tell us the central question?
Mm. Monk.
All right, what's the central question there?
I don't know. Um,
It's who killed his wife.
What?
It's who killed his wife.
Okay. I see. I've only watched like 10 episodes, so I was thinking
I watched one.
It was more of, can Monk manage his OCD while solving the mysteries?
Okay, so it's a crime of the week show, you're saying?
Yes. Uh-huh.
I see. Okay, and I think Mario was saying that there might be an overarching mystery that the character is trying to resolve, even through those crimes of the week, which would be who murdered his own wife.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, that definitely works. Yeah, procedurals don't really need a central question throughout the whole trajectory of the narrative. They really only have a central question of the episode, and usually it's going to be who did the crime. But in certain procedurals, it works a little different, like in the Ryan Johnson show called Poker Face, where they sort of give you all that info. You know exactly who did it. The question is more like why, or how exactly did it happen. Anyone else?
The
Well, this is
Mentalist.
Mentalist. Okay, go ahead. What is the central question in that show?
Who killed his wife?
It's also who killed his wife. What is all these wives getting killed all the time? I
Not
think
just
also
wife and child.
Wife and child. Yeah, it's basically the same. The cat, right? It's his cat.
I remember also I had an ex that was obsessed with the show. I think there's like a sort of central villain in The Mentalist as well, who is like the big bad guy who's behind a lot of the crimes that he's investigating, which is a common trope here. We see this in everything from Sherlock Holmes to James Bond, where it's like, no, I was the mastermind who did all those earlier things.
It also helps that the main lead is really hot.
Okay,
right?
that does help, sure.
Yeah, that really helps.
There's loads of like procedural shows where they're doing different twists, so they have mysteries. So for example, the one where it's got Nathan Fillion and he's a writer and he's working at the police
Castle.
department.
Yeah.
Castle, yeah. And so there's no real like central. I mean, in later series, the driving question becomes the will they, won't they, where like they're getting together. But like, there's no central overarching. But the mystery of the week is who done it or how did they do it, or there's usually some clever twist that the police miss because and he managed to solve it because he's a creative, he's a writer, and he's like, I would have done it this way, that kind of so he brings his unique twist into the precinct.
Yeah, that's a really common archetype too, the buddy mystery show, which is going to be, we have this one weird guy who we bring in and is able to solve crimes better because blank. Because he has psychic powers. Or that's like Medium was that show on NBC, right? Or it could be because this character has some quirk where they have a photographic memory. Or it could be that so they have some advantage or some tactic or something they're trained in. He can always tell when you're lying, that sort of thing. That's a really common way to make a show story engine very clear, because we understand what is the expertise or the twist that they're going to bring, like what is their expertise that is going to lead us to watching a certain type of crime be resolved.
There's also non-procedural, so like The Langoliers. That's a really old TV show with Dean Stockwell in it. I loved that. And the central mystery there is like, what's happened to them? Where is everyone?
Yeah, that's an ontological mystery based on a Stephen King book, I believe.
Yeah, the airplane lands and the people who are asleep, they wake up and other people have disappeared, literally leaving their clothes and everything fake behind.
Mhm.
And these people have got to figure out what's happened.
Yeah, sort
And
of
then
like Lost.
yeah, and then another show. Oh, I had another one that was similar to that. No, it's gone out of my head, but those shows I'm interested in.
Yeah, the sort of where the hell did everybody go genre, like Silent Hill.
Yeah, if we get time at the end to workshop some potential ideas, I have one of them where I'm like, I got a great concept. I don't know what actually happened to the people though, and I don't want to do a loss where they don't actually know.
Yeah, I guess the nice thing is that you don't really have to answer the central question, or you can't really answer the central question in the pilot. So you don't always have to wrap things up. In fact, you have to leave a lot unanswered.
I will say though, things are different in the UK. If I'm selling a serial in the UK, then their expectation is that I've written the pilot and I've written the whole series arc. Remember, serial being different to series because it's like a continual story. And so if I'm selling this to like the BBC or something, they'd expect
the
me
way-
to know the cause.
Right. Go ahead.
By the way, in Castle, Beckett, the female lead, her mom.
Oh
was
yeah,
killed, and so that's
Yes.
also the overarching question. of the
yeah,
series.
you're absolutely right. Completely forgot about that. Her
It's
mum.
always someone's mother. It's always some wife.
Yeah, there's often some
Yeah.
family question that needs to be solved in addition to the thing of the week.
Yeah, and with Castle, it's you don't you see the chemistry, and you keep asking, through the series, are they finally going to get together?
Right. Yes, the sort of central romance that keeps things going.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a couple different archetypes that we've touched on here. I mentioned Poker Face, which is kind of a one of these fair play whodunit. Actually, I haven't actually seen it, so somebody should tell me exactly how that works. But it's one of these ones where they give you all the clues up front. I guess what we would call the fair play, that's where we stick exactly to the detective's POV, and we don't know anything that they don't know. And so, in theory, you could resolve the question ahead of them. The clueless mystery is kind of like a subversion of normal mystery tropes where there deliberately aren't really enough clues to figure it out, and often we will be watching characters kind of stumble around, failing to resolve questions, and the interesting ways that they kind of stumble from one thing to the next can be quite entertaining as well, and that leads us to like the stoner mystery like Inherent Vice, or the Scooby-Doo, or the show Search Party is kind of like this as well. Then we have the reverse whodunit, where we know exactly what happened. Yeah, I guess that would be the Poker Face one. We know exactly what happened, but and we see all different sides or perspectives. Like in Fargo, we follow both the perpetrators and also the cops trying to catch them. But there are still questions we don't know. Think of season 1 of Fargo. The central question is kind of relating to Lauren Malvo. Like, who is this guy and what is he actually up to? Whereas we know who the killer is. It's Lester, we see at the end of the pilot. So Molly is trying to catch up with Lester, and over the entire show, that remains like the central conflict. But we have all these other additional mysteries that sort of blossom off of that. And in every season of Fargo, there are kind of these borderline paranormal or religious or sci-fi-ish questions that kind of pepper the series and leave it with this overall sense of mystery and kind of, obviously it's a mystery show, but like more than a sense of mystery, a sense of kind of magic-ishness to it, like magical realism adjacentness to it. I don't quite know how to explain it. Fargo has all these questions that will just never be resolved. Go ahead.
Can I ask a question about mysteries?
Sure.
It's sort of like about types of. So, do you know the TV show Quantum Leap?
I've never seen it, but I know the premise.
So I suppose my question there is would that class as a mystery, because each episode he's got to find what once went wrong that he's got to put right to be able to leap on. So each episode is like it's a person's life, it's a moment in somebody's life, and it's all very small things. It's very rare that he deals with any big historical events, but it's I mean, there are some episodes that are done definitely more of a mystery or a horror or a whodunit, but every episode is the question of what has he got to do to fix the situation? Would you say that? And then similarly, there was another one in the 90s that came out about a newspaper, first edition, and the newspaper would
Early
turn up on
edition.
the guys.
Isn't it called Early Edition?
Early edition, that's it. Yeah. And so he's got to figure out based on the article like what actually happened. And would you say that they're mysteries?
Yeah, definitely.
Just sort of not.
I think it really is because the character's central goal is still to resolve this question, and when they resolve it, they've succeeded at their. The plot is done. In that case, it's almost like a puzzle. It kind of reminds me of Groundhog Day, where like you're trapped in this weird supernatural situation. You don't know specifically how to get out of it. You have to almost just try stuff and see what works.
Yeah, I suppose like a locked room, a locked room mystery type, a puzzle room. What do you call them?
Escape room.
Escape room, yeah.
Yeah, the situations are like escape rooms, basically, in that there's like a very specific set of actions you need to take to move on. But the plot revolves around the character trying and failing and, stumbling through their best attempts to figure out what the answer is. So yeah, I think that is definitely a mystery archetype. As long as there's always that central question that sort of motivates the character's actions, and when they finish, the plot is done, then that fits. So, fair play, we talked about this concept of playing fair. This is that unspoken contract with the audience where we're promising that the author is not going to cheat. And by cheating, we might mean you contradict yourself, or it could be that it seems like a clue should have been obvious, but the camera just didn't show it. We didn't include it in the frame for some reason. Or we retcon something we said earlier. We want to misdirect constantly. It's okay to use some deception. We're signing up to be fooled, but within that you have to stick to the things that you've established to be true, and if you subvert those things and prove that they are no longer true, then that has to be for some sort of logical reason. It could be because one of your characters has a flawed perception. Think of a story like The Girl in the Train, which is all about this idea of this woman's having blackouts, and as a result, she thinks she sort of is being gaslit by people into thinking she did certain stuff. She's not even sure what she did or what she saw anymore. So having that, we can play around with the information that the audience has, and it fits into this concept of fair play as long as we've built the rules correctly. So you can absolutely show it in a series of events and then later flash back and show them differently if there's some reason why, like somebody was telling that story and they were lying, and then we find out the truth. Or it could be that someone's perception was altered, like I mentioned. Or it could be that if you have supernatural rules going on or something like that, you can use time travel or whatever. I mean, don't, but you can use whatever else you want. But generally, if you establish something to be true, you cannot later break that rule. If the camera shows something, you have to kind of establish this paradigm within your individual story. For instance, if the camera shows something, or if we see something happening on screen, is that literally actually true? Or could it be that we're in the sort of world where we're in like a courtroom drama and every character's testimony, like in Rashomon, sort of plays out on screen and we see their version of events? In the Bible, for some shows, they even kind of, the Bible being the document that sort of lays out the basics of how the show will work, they also lay out the bare essentials of how the portrayal of the truth will work. For instance, in the Bible of True Detective, they mention, or Nick Pizzolatto, the author, mentions, every time you see something playing out on screen, that happened. There's no deception there at all, despite the fact that the show is very much about characters lying about the events that we're seeing. So that's how you can kind of distinguish a little bit, like, am I going to allow the camera to show things that didn't actually occur, or that there's some difference of perception at play, or is everything we say going to be literally true? I realize that this might be kind of a little bit tough to wrap your head around unless you're writing a story that revolves around these ideas, but just try to stick to this concept of follow, if you give your word, you have to fulfill that. You have to always pay off the setups. Some deception is okay because we want to be tricked, but be thinking questions like this. What can you violate? When can you violate rules or assertions in the story? In what very specific circumstances can you? And when might the audience actually be impressed by a level of deception on the writer's part instead of kind of aggrieved by it? Because we like to be tricked, but we like to be tricked in a way that feels like, oh, you gave me all the tools that I needed to see that. I assumed something is a really powerful tool or thing to make the audience think. They realize, oh, they didn't show that happening. I just assumed that character was dead. But so it feels fair when they come back later. That's that, that Disney death ending where the character falls off the cliff or whatever. Oh, I guess they're gone, and then later they show up again. So try not to violate things that you have set up before. You can use the audience's assumptions to help them reach certain conclusions if you want them to. Think of the whole character gets shot early on in the movie, then we flash forward to later, and then we find out at the end they were a ghost the whole time, for instance. Well, we just assumed that they lived. We assumed that fading forward and moving to later meant that they had survived, and we were flashing forward to later on down the line after they'd recovered from being shot. But that was the audience's assumptions working against them, so it feels fair. So, some more unwritten rules will be that we are following one detective POV character. It doesn't have to be that way. We mentioned, like Fargo, for instance, where we are following both the perpetrators and also the people trying to catch them. The detective doesn't know the answer to the compelling question and will attempt to solve it through their investigation. This is a really common just paradigm here, where the audience is on the same page as the detective, and we're trying to solve the question alongside them, almost like, Blue's Clues is kind of this, right? We're trying to solve the mystery alongside Steve. He doesn't know, we don't know. When we both learn the answer, the story will be done. But you might twist that, we might learn halfway through the story that your detective actually is involved in the crime or something like that. You could always twist or subvert this. Every time the detective gains a piece of important information, we'll see it happen, and we'll thus be able to mentally track and log all of the clues. This is pretty important for the most part, unless you have your kind of Watson character that is working with the detective. We mentioned the buddy mystery, which Sherlock and Watson are like kind of one of these classic buddy mystery solver duos. And if you have this character that we're following along who's not the brilliant genius, but is in fact like an assistant to the brilliant genius or something like this, then it can work where the detective gets clues off screen. As long as we're on board with a character that is still trying to put things together at roughly the same rate that the audience is, the same capacity that the audience is. So that's why it can be useful to have a less informed or less a character with less expertise whom we do follow, who is forced to, they're always one step behind because we're kind of always one step behind. And it allows us to be more impressed with the hero, or with that Sherlock type detective figure. Perhaps the detective will process or explain a clue's significance as they find it, or perhaps they'll keep it to themselves, but they must share the progress of their findings and their working hypotheses with the audience before too long. It's going to be probably problematic for your narrative if your detective never really shares their theories, or isn't, that's why it's so helpful when they accuse people or interrogate people or things like this, because then that kind of forces them to externalize their thought process and say, I'm starting to believe it was this person who did it because of this. If they never really share what they're thinking, it might be a little too internal. You can see why so many noir mysteries had the voiceover, right? Questions kept pouring down like frozen rain, like that sort of genre. The Sin City sort of world. Because it's so useful to be able to track the detective's thought process and keep the audience on board with them and make sure that we know what they know what we know. Oh, they don't know what we know. What am I saying? We know what they know. With a mystery solver that's too internal or quiet, we would lose the opportunity to be entertained and impressed by their methods, especially if their methods are very internal. Think of somebody like Will Graham from the Hannibal series, who is always going into these sort of fantasy-type sequences where he recreates or mentally reconstructs the events of the insane serial killer's murders. And so by allowing us into the character's head, we sort of make it easier to be entertained by their cool tactics. There's going to be consistency in rules and devices related to characters' perception. If a character recounts their version of a crime and we see this play out, we're creating the precedent that the camera can lie, for instance. I mentioned this a little before. This is kind of a better way of summing it up than I think I was over-explaining the point before. But just think of a question like this. Can the camera lie? Can the things that we're seeing actually be not true? If you're going to build out a rule like that, you should try to stick to it as best you can. Are there any other unwritten rules of mystery that you guys can think of?
Well, I think that usually the person who is solving this is always extremely gifted, but also has some sort of disadvantage. Like I think of the classic Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock is great at solving these mysteries, but he has very poor interpersonal skills. And the person he's closest to, maybe his only friend, is Watson.
Yeah, sure. So, flawed central detectives whose personal lives might interfere with their cases, or their flaws might help them, or their unique tactics might help them, but their flaws might get in the way.
Yeah, and Sherlock has to learn to deal with this. Usually in the stories, but I'm discounting the movies because I don't think that Sherlock actually had a brother. I think that was something made up for the movies. So yeah, that's
No,
something.
no. He always had a brother.
Yeah,
Oh, he
Mycroft,
did.
right?
Okay, Mycroft. Okay, well, I couldn't remember, but that's just something that when you said is there anything else that tends to always go into a mystery that's or the person investigating always has some personal issue. It could be they're an alcoholic, could be they're in the midst of a divorce, or they're cheating, or their spouse is cheating, or there's always something going on in their lives personally.
Yes, drama in the character's personal life, maybe exacerbating their flaws or bringing their flaws out in a sharper way. Marriage falling apart, some addiction, or something they're trying to overcome. Very common tropes, definitely. Anyone else?
Although murder, I do say Murder She Wrote. I don't remember what was her central conflict. I don't remember. It's been so long since I watched it.
I have not seen it, so you'll have to ask. We'll have to ask the room.
Okay. Well, if no one else has seen it, that's okay. I was just curious how because I was thinking it maybe subverted it, but maybe not.
Not sure. I think she's just sort of like a cozy detective who has an agency who solves crimes, but I could be wrong on that. Somebody look
I
it
do
up.
know
Go ahead.
she's always discounted. I would say kind of gaslit by the either the police or whoever is trying to impede her ability to investigate. It seems like she's always discounted because she's a woman.
They don't take her seriously. Yes, that can be a challenge that characters work against too. That you also get that with young characters in like kid detective type stories, where it's like, you're just a kid, what do you know? Okay, let's keep going. So, mystery box is like a style of mystery storytelling that J.J. Abrams really popularized in his 2007 TED Talk. And this is all kind of centering on this idea that you have a really, really compelling central question that you layer a bunch of other mysteries over top of. So in attempting to solve that big question at the bottom of the box, you have to first unpack everything else. And so that means in order to figure out what is this island, well, in attempting to figure out what is this place, we stumble across a polar bear and a smoke monster and this weird institute and these crazy numbers and like this kind of cult that runs this island and all these other things that it's like a fractal mystery that blooms open and has so many other mysteries that present themselves to. Shows like Twin Peaks are based on this sort of structural premise. We're layering one vital piece of information at a time, setting up and answering smaller questions to sort of building trust, and then we usually leave a bigger question hanging, and some of the biggest turning points in these seasons, like the midpoints of seasons, are often going to be, we figure one thing out, but then something entirely new comes up. So we want the reader to think, I want to know the answer, and I'm confident that if I keep reading, I will find out, though you do run into trouble when you spend way too long not resolving those questions. I think we've seen this on TV before. So, in terms of setup, go ahead.
Is there a sweet spot between, not resolving it and resolving it? Because I think it would be interesting, if you had a mystery where you're going close to that point where you're not resolving it, but then you do, because I think that would I think that it would make people want to watch this a little bit more because they're thinking, come on, let's solve the mystery. And then, oh, finally they're solving the mystery.
There definitely is a sweet spot, and it's hard to find. It's hard to exactly identify where that will be, which is why it's best to actually unveil a few different questions. So although you might have a big question that by the end we may have not even gotten close to solving, you've given us a couple achievable mysteries along the way, which might be something like, we show up in this mysterious island. We're not going to learn what the island is, but we will learn what was making that weird sound. You see how you can kind of like, by packaging these smaller questions and then answering those, even if it doesn't get us anywhere near the biggest questions of all, it still feels satisfying and like we're making some kind of progress. So I think your sweet spot is going to come in, or it's going to be at that point where we still feel like we are making progress, but we have plenty of work to do. We have plenty of road to go down to answer the big questions.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, good question. So it can be useful to start in reverse, or to write in reverse, meaning that you have the answer to begin with, and then that will allow you to obfuscate that question with as many different layers of mystery as you want. So you start with the payoff and you work your way back towards figuring out what the setup is. Not every writer works that way, but that just is a common way of approaching this. That way you are ensuring that it ends up in a satisfactory way, but you just then the challenge becomes making all the pieces feel like they add up. So, in terms of endings, normally one of your suspects has to be the ones that have done it. Like if you cast suspicion, or if you build the type of story where it feels like, okay, we are laying out in the classic sense of the game, like the mystery game. We have our list, we have our crime, we have the clues, we have the list of suspects, and those are going to be the people that your character is investigating, tailing, following, interrogating, questioning, whatever it is. And if you make the promise that it was one of these people and you start feeling like you're playing that game with the audience where you can figure it out if you just follow the clues, then it basically does need to be one of them. Normally one of the suspects did it. If not, maybe everyone did it, no one did it, the detective did it, or a side character who's not a suspect did it. Those are basically your only other options, and everything has been done. Like, it's not that any of these is impossible to pull off. We've seen, like, even in the heyday of this genre, back in the, even Agatha Christie was running out of ways to really keep surprising people, so she tried everything. So, no matter what you think of, it's been attempted. But it just feels a little less satisfying if it feels like something the audience could not have put together on their own. If it feels like logical leaps had to be made, or there was some information that we never got access to, or the detective character made figured out such a complicated conclusion that there's no way we could have put it together. Like, I'm thinking when Batman resolves one of the Riddler's mysteries in the 1950s or 60s Batman show, he'll be like, oh, the Riddler left a slice of bacon at the crime scene. Bacon. What does that rhyme with? Macon. Ah, the killer's name must be Macon. It's like, wait, how did you do that? What? Like, and then he's right somehow. So the logic that Batman uses with the Riddler is like not exactly something the audience could have put together, which is part of the joke. It's supposed to sort of be funny how he stitches together these insane logical chains, but that doesn't really give you a satisfying resolution to the mystery. That's more just, it only works in that context of it's part of the gimmick of this character. So be really careful giving us any sort of resolution that is not one of the ones that the audience could have planned for. It should be one that we could it should usually be a conclusion that there's some way we could have reached, even if it would have taken a real expert to put everything together in the best way. A red herring is a clue that leads in the wrong direction, but it can still push your character towards the plot, especially in these sort of non-mystery, like stoner, stumble-around kind of mysteries like Scooby-Doo and things like this. The initial incorrect assumptions might put them on a collision course with something else, which bounces them like a pinball bumper in the right direction. Think of Shaggy, who they're like, go look for clues, Shaggy. And then Shaggy goes to the kitchen and leans on the wall, and he stumbles through the secret bookcase, and he rolls down the stairs, and he ends up right in the villain's lair. That can sort of still lead your character to interesting, funny places. We have foreshadowing as well, which is a writer that's going to spend a lot of time blatantly foreshadowing something only to play with the audience's heads. Has anybody seen the Final Destination movies?
I love them.
They do a lot of this, don't they?
Yes. But see, I like that. That's up my alley.
And this is, I'm going to take, for instance, the gymnast sequence from Final Destination 4. And so the hook of this series is that you avoid death and therefore basically death arranges various Rube Goldberg-style devices that will kill you, meaning random accidents will cause the broom to fall over, which will knock over the lamp, which starts a fire, which burns down the curtain rod, which slides down and impales you. Things like this. And we have this one sequence where they sort of lean really heavily into that. There's a gymnast doing a routine on a balance beam, and the camera focuses on everything, every terrible thing that could go wrong, or every bad thing that could happen. We focus in on an electrical wire that's near a puddle on the floor, and we zoom in on a single screw that rattles loose from the ceiling and lands on the balance beam, and she dances, she's like doing her routine, dancing delicately on either side of this upturned screw, that one false move and she'll step on it. We've got like 5 things that could go wrong, and then at the end she just trips off and falls and breaks her neck. It's like we were pretending that all those things were going to pay off somehow, and then to pull the rug out at the last second can be surprising and funny and interesting, and can just be an amusing ending to a sequence like that. It's sort of the opposite of normal foreshadowing.
I haven't seen that one, but that's one of the things I love about that series is that, you know, I would call it a kind of misdirection. I don't know what it's actually called, but that's one of the like I said, that's one of the reasons I just love that series of movies.
Yeah, and the plots often revolve around the characters trying to figure out the foreshadowing, because they have some of the clues, and so they're trying to now figure out, well, what was that actually foreshadowing? I saw in my vision, I saw an image of like a scythe. So that means I'm going to stay away from sharp objects. But then it turns out that later you find out that vision was just a billboard that they passed by or something like that, right? And you can kind of like use the character's first assumptions based on this faux shadowing to lead them in the wrong direction, or set them up for a big scare, or for, some terrible death in this case. But yeah, Final Destination movies are mostly mystery types. The first one more than most, just because we kind of don't know the rules yet, and the character learning the rules becomes the movie, essentially. And then in the later ones, the rules change a little bit, so they're kind of hard to follow. But the first one, I would say, is the clearest example of central driving question mystery. Last, we have our untwist, which is going to be an outcome or answer to a mystery considered to be too obvious, but it turns out to be what happened anyway. That's kind of like the Knives Out thing, where it's like, oh, that guy is the clear suspect. It couldn't have been him. Oh, wait, no. But after everything is said and done, it was him. Was there another question? Go ahead.
Oh, I forgot. I apologize.
Okay. All good. So, let's talk twists and clues, and then we will share our log lines for today. Or maybe go ahead.
Go ahead and put it in the put the document in the chat, or is there a documents channel for this?
There's not. So I'm going to lose it if you post it now. So just wait for me to call for everyone to share them in just a minute. Okay. So let's do twists first, and then we will do log lines, and we'll do chain of clues after we share. Okay, so starting with twists. So twists have to use this concept of fair play in order to really feel satisfying. If it's going to be a twist that there's no way we could have seen it coming, then usually the audience will just be annoyed by this. If you build up all these clues that the character seems to be following, we find the matchbook that takes us to the strip club, and the bouncer there tells us, I saw the killer go into that bathroom. We go into that bathroom, we find a cell phone, and the cell phone leads us to the dockside, and then the criminals that are there, it turns out, oh wait, no, they're aliens. Then we're like, huh? What? Like, you didn't layer in any of that stuff, so the fact that I couldn't possibly have called that means that I feel sort of deceived or cheated in a bad way. Then again, there could be a way that you, here and there throughout the whole story, you sort of hint at the alien thing again and again, right? When we go into the dockside warehouse, we find a sticky puddle of green alien blood on the floor, and we don't know what it is. And then later on, we find laser blast burns on the side of the warehouse, and we think, oh, those must have come from a fire. And then later, your character sees a spaceship fly past, and they think it's a drone. I don't know. Terrible example. But you get the idea of how you can kind of layer in these subtle clues that lead up to something, but it needs to feel like the cumulative effect of that information, not just like it comes out of nowhere. So we mentioned the character gets shot in the first 5 minutes, and the movie flashes forward, and we think we think he's okay, and that we're just fading to later after he's recovered. But no, we just assumed that. Use the audience assumptions against them. The Saving Private Ryan one, similar idea, right? We start on this old man in the graveyard flashing back to his wartime memories, and we fade from him to Tom Hanks. So we assume, oh, that old guy must be Tom Hanks' character. Nope, it turns out that was someone else in the story. That was Matt Damon's character, someone we haven't met yet. We just assumed that fading from one person to another meant that it was the same person. So that feels fair and earned, and that will always get you a lot farther than, just kidding, it was aliens. So coming up with the twist first, then reverse engineering the setup so it flows organically into that planned story can be a great way to approach this. It's okay if you don't really know, but like by the end of your first, at least story beats pass, you should probably be kind of figuring out what the answers to these questions are. It's okay if on your very first pass you're just sort of figuring it out as you go along. And there is something to be said for this method of write a bunch of possible suspects and possible answers, then at the end just sort of pick your favorite, which is what Agatha Christie actually would do sometimes. So you can try that, but usually it won't be quite as satisfying as I planned this really interesting answer to begin with, and now the characters have to go through every step of figuring that out. You might want to try brainstorming a dozen possible endings by just thinking of what would my first assumption be? What would my first guess be? If I were the audience here, what do I think would be the solution to the central question? And then that can make a good red herring. And you would use the runners-up, so the other ones, those could be your different twists or other sort of red herrings along the way. If you think of what are 10 possible answers to the question, use the best one as the actual answer, and everything else are going to be possible teases or things that you suggest to the audience. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. You can also misdirect the reader into asking the wrong questions in an effective way, something like Arrival, which does something similar to the, using the audience assumptions against them that I've been talking about so much today. We throughout the whole movie, we see what we assume are flashbacks, and we are kind of focused on something else. There's like another mystery that we don't think there's a central question in these flashbacks because the character doesn't seem to be trying to resolve anything there. It seems like she's just being plagued by bad memories. And so we're left with this question of, what are the aliens trying to say to us? How do we communicate with these aliens? And at a certain point, about 75% of the way through the story, we find out that those answers are actually linked, and that there is a connection there that we weren't even thinking about because, we assumed they were flashbacks, but they weren't. I won't give it all away, but I will just say they're not quite what we thought they were. And we've already ruined the Sixth Sense a million times, so I think it's okay to just spell that one out like we have before. Show the character get shot, fade to later. We think, oh, okay, they recovered. For a great plot twist to work, we need to pay attention to the other aspects of storytelling. Like, a twist is never going to work in a vacuum, and it's never going to be the thing that will save your story. Like, if the story fundamentally isn't working, very rarely will a twist help you. It's like you can't have the kid to save the marriage, right? A twist at the last second is not going to automatically make a story better. And it's not going to make up for a story that didn't make sense for 90% of it. So there is something to be said for this genre of like, what on earth is going on? And then in the last 5 minutes, we learn what was really happening. I'm looking at you, escape room movie. But you run into this problem of if the answer is so complicated that the story doesn't make any sense without the proper key solutions, then just because it all kind of adds up at the end doesn't retroactively have made that movie a good experience. I hope that makes sense. So that's why it's helpful to have these sub-mysteries or these smaller questions that we can kind of resolve along the way to feel like we are making progress and we're not totally just floundering in the dark the entire time. There are some Twilight Zone episodes that were also like that. It's like the whole thing is leading up to the last 5 seconds where we learn what was going on here. I'm thinking of the one where there's a bunch of people wearing different strange, almost like Halloween costumes that are in a giant bucket, and they're trying to get out of a bucket for the full episode. And then at the end, one of them finally lifts the other one out and gets them out, and we find out that these are toys in a Salvation Army kind of Christmas donation bin. I don't know. Look, it was unexpected. I'm not sure if it made the story retroactively interesting. Sometimes the questions are more interesting than the answers, which can be a problem with mystery writing. I'm thinking of, in this same vein, the movie Prisoners to me. The questions were more interesting than the answers. I won't dig too deep into that one because we're mostly talking TV today, but there's a lot of kind of teases as to some kind of deeper, darker mystery going on besides just there's some missing kids, right? Like they keep finding clues to there being some kind of labyrinth involved, right? Where are the kids? They're in the labyrinth. We keep finding like these drawings of this strange like maze, and then by the end it's sort of like, no, they were just kidnapped by a crazy person. Like it's not actually that compelling. I find if you build out your questions to be more interesting than the answer, then sometimes the ending feels unsatisfactory, even if the story overall works. So that can be an issue. Okay, let's save chain of clues for after we do loglines, and let's hear from you guys. What are your ideas that you'd like to workshop for this bootcamp? Feel free to post those series and pilot loglines in the chat now. I will give you all a minute to do that.
I posted my log line. I'm assuming this was the time to do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Luke does not have a logline. He just joined. That's okay.
Hi, Luke.
We have 3 from Becky, so she's more than made up for it. Okay. Anyone else, feel free to post now. We'll go in the order that they were posted. So we'll start with Michelle.
Okay.
All right, so this is a mystery, right?
Yes, it's a mystery. It's also a procedural, like cop, fire, hospital, show.
Okay. Let's take a look. Is this the series or the pilot logline?
I guess this is the series log line. I have a pilot log. Well, the pilot log line is that terrorist attack happens in the pilot.
Okay.
And that. Okay.
Okay, got it. After a terrorist attack, a family of dedicated first responders must resolve their personal and family issues while maintaining their career. So is their career, like, in jeopardy after this attack?
I think it's the career and the family. That this is kind of, I'm trying to refine the original log line. The original idea was that you just have a bunch of first responders, and my idea was that to take, hospital procedural, cop procedural, fire procedural, paramedic procedural, and put them all in one show. And then you were telling me that, well, the characters need to have some relationship to each other, and I thought, well, what if they were all in one family? I have a family that's overpopulated with medical personnel. But we also had a cousin who was a cop, and he was killed here. So I thought, what if all those people existed in a single family? The kids and the in-laws and maybe the grandkids.
Okay. It's a good idea. It's a good way to centralize the characters together. So I would think that you will need a clearer direction of the plot, though. This is sort of just like saying there's a bunch of first responders and they do their jobs. But first of all, so I don't think we're in a mystery. This sounds like a procedural, like, what do we even call this? Crime. It's not quite crime. I guess you're combining several things together in a slightly new way. So it totally works. I just think it doesn't feel like there's a central question that needs to be resolved here. Am I right?
Well, I was thinking that the central question is that, the cops have to solve the crime. The firefighter has to work with, like, the chief, or maybe it is the chief, and they have to solve whatever fire happened. The doctors, the paramedics or nurses in the family, they have to figure out, what the patient has, and maybe I could combine all those things, like, the terrorist attack, it caused a fire. There were injuries, some casualties. Now we got the police have to figure out who the terrorists were. The medical personnel have to figure out, how to help the survivors. The fire people have to figure out, how if there were incendiary devices used along with the bomb, etc. And they have to figure that out. And then they come together like at dinner time and they're discussing what's going on. It's not, like, hey, how was your day? It was, hey, have you gotten close to solving who the terrorists were or what the device was, used? And it's that kind of family discussion, not so much how was your day,
Okay.
and
I see what you mean.
you see what
Yes, I totally see. So I think you're going to have to position one of them as like the sort of more important, meaning if the main crux of the show is sort of stopping or identifying the terrorists who did this, maybe you want to position the police officer as like the matriarch or patriarch of the family, and that's sort of going to like guide the direction of the rest of the show. So instead of saying a family of first responders does their jobs, it would be something like the father of a family of first responders tries to catch a terrorist, and along the way, we are going to be following these subplots of his family members trying to maintain the chaos or, mitigate the chaos of this attack. So I would pick one of these as like the most important and consider like, is this mostly going to be, like, is the focus of this going to be on stopping bad guys? Or is the focus of this going to be on the firefighters? Or is it on the doctors?
Okay, I was thinking that, yeah, for the pilot, it would be whoever is the police officer. Maybe they're the lead detective, who is working on this. And for the pilot, yeah, you have that person as the main character. But then maybe the next episode, you might have the medical personnel and the family, and they're the main characters, or it's their episode. Do
I
you
see
see
what
what
you
I'm
mean.
saying?
Yeah, I see what you mean. But so for the purposes of this, try to pick just what the first episode would focus on. So something like, the patriarch of a first responder family struggles to bring order to chaos in the wake of a blank and blank attack with the help of his blank and blank family, or something like that. That just feels like we have a clear, tangible goal.
Okay. Okay. I'm not sure exactly how to do that, but I'll come up with ideas and then I'll bring them. And I'm not working on this um, right now because I'm focusing on the sci-fi novel, but I just thought I'd come this in and workshop it a little bit, if that's okay.
Yeah, all good. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure. Thanks for the help.
Mm-hmm. All right. Looks like we have some more log lines to look at. Becky, are you ready to go next?
Yeah, hello.
Hello. And also, do we have a chat from somebody on Twitch is chatting with us? Look at that. Hi, Mellow and Tears. Thanks for joining. Okay, Becky, let's do it. Let's look at the first log line.
These aren't log lines, they're concepts, because once I decide which concept I want to go for, I'll then work out what the pilot episode is.
Okay.
But I really want to do one of those mystery of the week type shows with a supernatural twist that you used to get, like the Early Edition or Quantum Leap or that kind of concept, So, I've basically got 3 ideas. Paranormal post office set in a small town. Bear in mind, it's all set in England. Where a quaint post office acts as a gateway for paranormal mail. Each week, the postmaster and her eccentric team receive a supernatural letter or package that sets off a mystery to solve, often involving ghosts, cryptids, or lost souls. It can also go the other way, like a little girl that's writing to her grandparent or something, but it kind of usually be some sort of item that needs to get back to someone or some kind of murder that needs to be solved. And it's through like these letters that are sent to this one post office that's on this like rift of the paranormal in our world. So they're human people. They start receiving these letters and parcels from like people who have passed.
Do you want to do one at a time, or do you want to maybe what's the best way to approach this? Do you want to read them all out and then we'll go through them?
I'm going to read them all out, and then we can kind of see which concept feels like the strongest.
Okay, sounds good. Go ahead.
The frequency finders, so a group of amateur radio enthusiasts accidentally tap into a mysterious frequency that broadcasts distress calls from unknown sources, or maybe it's like an internet thing. Each episode centers around tracing the origins of the signal and helping those in need, whether they're lost hikers, interdimensional travelers, death, murder. But they won't always be surrounding someone who's passed on. It could be someone just in sort of dire need.
Okay.
Or completely out there, an intergalactic detective agency. So they're all different species. Think Star Trek, but with a little bit of Sherlock Holmes or Dirt Gently in there. It's different planets. There'll be interplanetary politics. I gotta be honest, that one is half baked. I just wanted.
It's quite ambitious.
Rule of 3. Yeah, it is. I wanted rule of 3, and I'm sort of like, what's the most outlandish thing I could think of?
Right, all good. Okay, so let's take a look. So Paranormal Post Office, I think there's something here. It reminds me a little of this Australian show called The Strange Calls. Have you heard of this one?
No, I haven't.
I quite like it. I think there's only 1 or 2 seasons of it. It's very short, like most Australian series are. And it's kind of like just out in the middle of I think it's a guy that works for like a local government office or something like that, but in the middle of like rural Australia. And they just get weird phone calls that usually lead him towards sci-fi-ish kind of mysteries that need to be answered, or they present like a danger to him in some kind of way, he needs to get out of it, or it's just like they get a weird call every week. It's like it's almost like Courage the Cowardly Dog or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think that especially so to begin with, it's helpful if the premise of your show or the story engine is served by this like a goal for the characters, and the idea of we get this mail that we have to deliver does feel like it has a nice goal built into it. It feels pretty simple. I feel like because like first of all, at the post office they don't open the mail, so we're not going to be able to open the mail there, right? They're trying to get it to interesting. Well, let's just think for a second. What does it say here? They receive a supernatural letter or package that set off a new mystery to solve. But isn't the extent of their interaction with the mail delivering it to where it needs to go?
Well, yeah. Yeah, I suppose that doesn't really work then, does it?
Well, it could if you think perhaps that the mystery relates sort of to how do we get this thing to where it needs to go. Imagine they get like a letter that has an address that, it's 13 Plainview Crescent, but Plainview Crescent only goes up to 12 or something like that, right? Maybe it could have that aspect of, well, delivering these becomes kind of the, like, how do we deliver it becomes the mystery of the challenge. And then once you get it there, maybe that character needs more help from them.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of being a quaint post office as well is that, in a small town, you get to know your posties quite well.
That's true. Okay.
So,
I wonder how you could use that. So this is like let's think what's the problem to begin with. So what would the kind of conflict actually be? My suggestion was, how do we actually deliver this mail? And then maybe the mail contains stuff that causes issues, I guess, like we open a letter and a fairy comes out or something. I don't know. What do you think? What would the conflict center around?
I was thinking it's more like it's a way for, although it does then become a Midsummer Murders mystery problem where it's like, why do these murders happen in one village? But I was thinking more like a cozy. I've got a producer that's looking for a cozy mystery with a like supernatural sci-fi twist. And so I was thinking it would be like ghost spirits. People are able to send these letters to this post office so that this like postmaster is kind of using the letter and the address and such to like solve crimes or it's not always going to be who murdered me. You know, sometimes it might be, you know, my wife leaves loads of money and I buried it in the garden, or do you know what I mean? It's like different kind of, like pushing up daisies, or you know, yeah, the one where she talks to ghosts, that kind of like thing, but a different way than just being a medium.
Okay, I'm just not quite seeing the concept come together yet, mostly because the postmaster doesn't look at the mail, right? So how are they even seeing what's in these packages? Or is it less about that and more about something else? We can come back to this question if you want.
I mean, yeah, I suppose I just sort of thinking post office, but maybe it's an address where all these get sent to, and
Okay.
it's like,
Yep.
how do these people get
Yeah, think of
Find
maybe it's not the post office. Maybe it's like a retirement home or something like that, like a place where people live and they start getting weird mail.
or it could be a combination of the mail and the frequency finders, where it's maybe some kind of computer that gets someone's computer that gets mail. Have you heard about that case where the person would end up talking to someone from the past? You know, a ghost hijacked their computer. Maybe it's something. I get paper mail all the time, Mario. Lots of people still do.
Mm-hmm.
Bills and stuff.
Or maybe maybe it says. I mean, maybe this could interfere too much with your other idea. But if it was something as simple as, in this post office, you can send and receive letters to the dead. Something like that would, to me, feels like it has a pretty strong hook in it. It might bleed through into your other ghost story that you're working on, though.
I mean, that doesn't matter because that one's for kids. This would be like a feel-good adult, like, well, I say adult family, but adult, like, you know, crime drama, supernatural twist, like I say, like that one where you can talk to ghosts.
Right. There's a bunch of those. Okay,
yeah, basically that kind of thing. So the problem with being able to contact the dead person yourself is that where does the crime mystery come from? The crime mystery comes surely from a dead person being able to contact you and say, I was murdered.
Yeah, then maybe it's like a police office or something like that instead of a post office? Or someone that you write to for... I'm not quite sure. Let's come back to this idea, because I think there is something interesting there, especially the idea of we're going to... Because now that you mentioned, if the concept is each of the mail that comes in is a request of some kind, that almost does lead to that very nice kind of My Name is Earl style structure to the show, where it's like, okay, in every episode, we get a problem of the week. This ghost writes in and is like, hey, I need help doing this and this thing. Can you go help my family do this? That might be pretty good, but let's come back to it in a minute. Let's look at the frequency finders. A group of amateur radio enthusiasts. Do you mean kids?
No, not kids. Just like in the old days, we used to do CB radio. So,
ham radio.
Yeah, ham radio, CB radio. But like, people do that now using computers, and they sort of connect to different different radio frequencies via their computers. A lot of people do it to look for extraterrestrial life and things like that. They're like adding their computer data to the search.
Yeah, I've seen this in movies and things like Contact.
But all of these concepts would be adults. These are not children's. Those are my books.
Okay, fair enough. I was going to say this one feels like it would really work with children protagonists, because the sort of rationale for why do we keep scanning on our radios and finding mysteries to go solve, it feels like it's easier to justify for kids somehow, because kids are just like, mystery solving is awesome. I guess you could do that with adults too, but it feels like adults have a stronger sense of danger and self-preservation usually. So is there maybe, I wonder, some way to amp up the stakes, or to...
The problem is,
go ahead.
The producer that I spoke to doesn't do kids shows, So that's why I'm trying to find. But he said he was specifically looking for something which I always loved, like those 90s type shows. So.
Okay. So why would a group of adults all get together and say, let's solve radio mysteries?
Well, there's a group of adults that get together on to solve cold cases on the internet. Lots of cold cases have been solved on the internet.
Okay, so just as a hobby?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a sort of central way you can get the characters invested in the, like, if one of them has a personal connection at least to the first thing that happens, maybe that would be a way to draw them in. Sort of a little higher personal investment. I'm not quite sure what it could be. It feels like this is this a sci-fi premise? You say interdimensional travelers, so you mean like we're doing aliens in different dimensions and stuff?
Not necessarily aliens, but this was more of a sci-fi. Although this could still be ghosts thinking about it. I mean, ghosts. Yeah, there was a 911 call where the woman kept calling and she kept calling like for help, but she was dead.
Okay.
So it could actually, the radio frequencies make more sense for the ghost to contact for help, surely.
Yeah, it sort of feels like that crosses the boundaries between worlds in whatever way. And looking at the last one, the detective agency on a space station, it just feels like there's not quite enough here to work with at the moment. This kind of feels like a description just of like a genre combination rather than a specific story. This is like, it's space opera, but they're solving crime. So there could be something there. I think you would just need to zero in on what's the hook. Is it a character? Is it the nature of the crimes they're solving? I mean, is this a comedic show? Is this a serious show? I think we just need some more meat on the bones there.
Oh yeah, all of these are like in really initial concepts, like not thought out at all yet.
So out of all of these, I am very into the idea of weird mail and getting that weird mail. I think you have to have some way that your heroes are able to receive it and open it up and look at it in order to make the most use of it. And that could be one address. Like, think of what if it was just one address that starts getting all this mail. This one house. This one home in the country. Maybe, man, it could be that it even belongs to the postmaster. What if the show was just called, like, Postmaster's House? And the Postmaster's House. Or the Postmaster, something like that. And they just start receiving this strange stuff, even though, they don't know where it's coming from, they're not ordering it or soliciting it. Maybe that could be a good way into the story. What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay, give it some thought.
Yeah, I will. And also thank you to Mellow and Tears on Twitch. Nacho shared what you were saying. Those are helpful comments as well.
Thank you. All right. Do you want to ask anything else about these, or do you want to just chew on this for now?
I want to just chew and I want to see which one would sort of jump out the most.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. We will reopen our floor to other log lines then, but if you have more ideas, feel free to speak up. Okay. Thanks, Becky. We have one from
Mario.
Yes, I think we have one from Mario.
All right, so the log line is as follows: when a serial killer is unjustly accused of killing his own wife, he must track down his copycat while being hunted by his own father, Sherlock Holmes.
Whoa. A lot going on there. Go ahead.
So it begins with the son who just got a call from his mom. His mom saying, your father isn't really in the best of conditions. You should really, patch things up with him. But because his dad is Sherlock Holmes and he kind of hates him because he's been how Sherlock Holmes is, right? Like a know-it-all and like try to treat him harsh, try to teach him. So he just doesn't want to talk to him anymore. But for himself, he kills every person every month. But for some reason, it's starting to become more and more. The urge is coming up more and more, and now he has to kill one every week, right? And then this is where his this is where he comes back home. He finds his wife his face is all scarred up and like unrecognizable, right? And there's blood everywhere, and the police thinks he's the killer, and then he's being hunted by his father, and that's where the inciting incident starts.
Okay. So there's a lot of very strong stuff here. Serial killer trying to track down his own copycat has an element of dark irony to it, which is fun. I will say it almost feels like there's too much going on, in the sense of you have like a lot going on in a complex story, and then at the end you're like, and the villain is Darth Vader. It's like you just throw in like a huge thing right there at the end. So I mean, it is surprising for sure. Let me ask a quick.
So there's
question.
an ending. There's an ending to this.
Okay.
So the ending is that his wife isn't dead. It was all a thing by Sherlock Holmes, his father, saying so. Sherlock Holmes investigates crimes because he wants to see people see people dead in order to control his own urges, and in order to force his son to learn from him, right? He's like, at the end of the year, I will give you back your wife, and then that will be the next season. I mean, that will be the start of the season, and then he has to work with his father and learn from him to control his urges. And so they kill a person every week. It's like, for now, I'm gonna kill a person every week with you, but eventually we're gonna stop and just investigate. That's just the first season.
Okay, I was going to ask. So the story engine for this feels like a mini series almost, but you're saying this is kind of only the premise for season 1.
Yeah.
And this premise is already not even exactly the case, because it's not even true that his wife is dead?
No, it's basically Dexter. It's the start of Dexter. It's like, think of a TV movie in the beginning that starts off the series, and it becomes Dexter.
Right. Okay.
But with Sherlock Holmes as your teacher.
Okay. So there's definitely a lot of mysteries here. It doesn't I'm not even sure if there's a central mystery, because you're sort of saying, you're presenting it as if there is one, but then it's resolved before season 1 is even done. And our perception of everything changes. So this is a non-traditional mystery structure, at the least. Let me ask this question. So what are we rooting for here? Are we rooting for him to find a way to stop killing people? Or, like, once he figures out the answer that his wife is not even dead, why are we still invested in the show? What is it that's going to keep us watching? Go ahead.
When it gets boring, right? When it gets like whatever, at like maybe episode 4, episode 3, his father dies, right? And now he has to find where his wife is using what he's taught, and then now he has to control the urges himself. Right?
That's in season 1?
It's basically Dexter with a kind of a new kind of a trigger or kind of catalyst at the mid-season mark. That's the cycle.
Okay, and so once the question of who killed my wife is resolved, the answer being no one, then what is the next goal for the character?
The thing is, it's basically controlling your own urges and not get caught by the cops.
Okay, so he's like a fugitive from then on?
The thing gets resolved, right? The thing gets resolved. The thing gets resolved where he finds the copycat and pins it on him in episode 1.
Oh, that only happens. That's all in episode 1.
That's all. It's a TV movie where it gets resolved. It's like maybe a 1 hour, 2 hour beginning episode pilot, and then from then on it's Dexter.
Okay, so you're saying he has a different goal in the rest of the show than he does in the pilot?
Yep.
Okay, that feels like a little problematic. That's sort of like saying this is an anthology.
Rug pull. It's basically a rug pull.
Right, but so that means that the pilot is now not representative of what the rest of the show would be, right?
True, but I'm like a novel writer, so it's like I just go for the novelty factor of it rather than the promise of it.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, if the writing is really compelling, I can see it potentially working. It's just that in terms of a series, you normally want the pilot to sell the idea of the show, and therefore the pilot shouldn't be fundamentally super different from the rest of the show.
It's based on Netflix structure. It's 8 episodes, right? Usually they order, and so like I basically don't think that the procedural thing is viable anymore. So I'm really going for that 8 episode sort of Netflix HBO Max style.
I see. Okay. Well, even given that, I think if you had some kind of question that was unveiled in your pilot that needed to be resolved later down the line, it would hook us in a little bit to watching the rest. Like, if it feels like we just watched the beginning, middle, and end, and now it's over, then that doesn't really lead to, or that doesn't really present a strong story engine. It feels more like this is just going to be a series of things happening in the same world, like an anthology-style show. So if you can, I guess my recommendation would be either sell it as an anthology-style show, so lean into that more, or find some sort of continuance of, conflicts that need to be resolved over the course of many episodes. It feels like you're in that sort of in-between spot right now.
I'll take that into consideration.
Okay, great. Do you have any questions?
Not particularly.
All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry. This is Carolina. I was wondering if I could go next because I have to step out for an event.
Sure.
I know it's not a mystery. I just want to get at least a little bit of feedback.
Okay. Sounds good.
So it was the last one. The nerdy, Caro.
Carol on Discord?
Caro.
Okay. All right. Why don't you read it out for us?
Sure. Nerdy Mexican-American teen is forced to move to Mexico with her family to continue to run the family farm after her grandfather's death. And she plots to sabotage the operation to return to the USA and attend her dream college. Obviously, not a mystery. Could be turned into a mystery, maybe, but just a simple teen drama. Person of American origin moving to Mexico, although ethnically Hispanic, not really culturally Hispanic or culturally Mexican. So the drama is kind of also the cultural drama of, you're not really Mexican, although you look like it, but you grew up in America, going to another country.
Okay, and so when you say she plots to sabotage the operation, what does that mean?
I don't know. I mean, just finding a way. Basically, it's just I couldn't figure out how to get the family to. Her goal is to return to the U.S. She doesn't want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So they could either be sabotage, like by messing up machinery, causing conflict within the family, because this is likely inherited land. That potentially there could be family conflict with who owns the property. Or it could be the opposite of trying to make it succeed, like doing whatever it takes to succeed. Either way, just whatever it is has to happen to come back to the status quo of living in America.
So is she trying to get back home for like years of the show? Like every year is it's like Gilligan's Island, whatever. She's trying method after method after method to escape this life?
Probably just the first year.
Oh, just the first year. So is it really about her trying to make the best of it in this new place?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, then I would frame her goal a little differently. Because you framed it right now almost like a prison escape show, right? Like we're trying to get out of this place, and by the time that she does, the show will, that's her central goal. The show's over. But if it's more, that sounds like that's sort of her initial reaction to moving there, and it's not really at the heart of what the show is about. So I would ask instead of what she's trying to avoid, ask what is it that she's there to try to do? Like what larger goal could she work towards there? Maybe it's something like
that makes sense.
Maybe it's something like I want to rejuvenate my family's failing business over time, and at first she hates it. Like at first she hates farm life or whatever it is, and tries to get away. But that's more just like a conflict for a few episodes, not really like her show overall goal. So maybe think of what is it that she's trying to build, or like is she trying to fit into the family? Is she trying? I'm guessing is she going to school here as well?
Yeah. So I guess that's the other thing. So I guess in the long run, the goal to return to U.S. But at the ultimate, just getting into a good college, right? So maybe how to build a resume out from that life. It's a rural small town in Mexico. How do you build out your academic career there and still make it good enough to go to a U.S. college? So finding something, I don't know, tutoring, or I don't know, making an NGO, something. I'm open to ideas. But now obviously this is mystery, so I didn't know if another one could be like, some mysticism surrounding the grandfather's death. So that would be something completely different if you want to turn to mystery. But you're right. So focus on just the family, and making the best of it. I guess that's a good way to put it.
Right. There's a show. I think it's a Spanish language show called Land of Women that is on Apple TV, which kind of reminds me of this premise. I think it's like big city girl goes to support the rural side of her family out. Total fish out of water sort of thing. So there's a lot that you can do there. I think that instead of saying what she's trying to avoid, though, try to focus it more on what she is trying to actively do. So that could be that you need to frame a sort of objective in a clearer way. Maybe like she's trying to get her family's business back on its feet, or it could be that she's trying to start or is she trying to fund her trip back by raising money? Is she trying to like, gosh, I'm not even sure what other objectives could be expressed in the logline alone. But it sounds like it's more about her being a fish out of water, trying to hack it in a new place rather than trying to constantly get home.
Yeah.
Okay. So you might just have to do some thinking on maybe the specifics of the family business, because the nature of the family business will really inform how she goes about this and like what their status is. Like, are they town royalty or are they like rejects in this town? Like, are they at the bottom of the social ladder? Were they high status before, but now they're low status? It seems like the grandfather's death would shake things up quite a lot. So maybe it's kind of like Arrested Development. You know, the family's in chaos, in disarray, after the patriarch is now gone. So now they need to, or Succession, right? We need to pick who's gonna run the family now. Could be something that has to do with the power struggle in the family itself, if the family actually has any power. If they just live in poverty and they don't have any actual influence or reputation, then it matters less. It would be a little bit more like, God, I just need to get through another day for her, I would think. But yeah, I would try to flesh out some more details of the family business. Are they in crime? Are they in agriculture? Are they in science? Whatever it is that they do will sort of inform the resources she has access to and also the types of goals that she could have.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem. Hope that's helpful. And also, I would say, just as a last thing, consider adding a central relationship to the logline itself. And that could be, you know, she needs to come back and stay with her overbearing aunt, or she needs to come stay with her estranged sister from the side of the family that she's never met before, or something like that. If you can, like, think of one character represents, or our one character is the fish out of water, we have another character that represents, I guess, the new, or the world that she has to ingratiate herself into. Then you might be able to get a little more of that inherent drama in the logline itself. Hope that helps.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
No problem. Any questions?
Nope.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I had a question.
Let's let Carol ask first, just because she has to go soon. Go ahead, Carol.
Oh, no, I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for sharing. Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, so my question is regarding what Mario was saying about that procedural shows aren't very viable anymore, and the what's in vogue now is writing Netflix style shows where you have like a limited number of episodes. Isn't that what he was saying?
I believe so. Yep. That procedural shows are less popular than they were in the past, but if you watch network TV like CBS or ABC, they are still very, very much on. They still come out.
Okay, but if you're trying to, break into the business, as just any kind of writer, and decide you want to do this, would it be better off if you write a Netflix style show? And could you write a Netflix style show and still have it to be a procedural drama?
Yes, to all of the above. Yes, you could write a miniseries or I guess you'd call it a Netflix-style limited series that has procedural elements. You absolutely could. Mm-hmm. And but as to the question of should you write that, you should write whatever exhibits your skills the best and whatever gets you the most excited about writing it, and whatever kind of show you would want to write on. If you want to write on the staff of shows like CSI, then you should write that kind of show. Whereas if you want to write stuff like True Detective, then you should write more like limited series, I would say.
Oh, okay. I love True Detective. Oh, I adore that show. Okay. I really appreciate that. And like my TV show, when I write the pilot, when I get to that, and I begin to write out the show, how would I differentiate a miniseries versus a long running show, and still make it procedural?
Well, so it wouldn't exactly be procedural. Procedural shows are usually not limited series. They, the whole idea is that they could last forever and ever. Like, it's gonna be more about, like, detectives or doctors or something like this that are doing a job of the week. That's how procedural shows normally work. So in terms of how would you write a miniseries or limited series logline differently, the scope of the story is going to be smaller. So it's going to look and sound a little bit more like a movie logline, in that you want to, I would set it up with clear protagonist, clear, concrete, tangible goal, and it just feels like it should feel like it can be achieved in one season. If it's a goal that's like, our character needs to take down every planet of the evil empire, that would feel like a substantial epic goal, whereas for a limited series, it should feel like something that can be accomplished in like 8 to 12 episodes.
Okay. Well, what I really want is more of a procedural, it's not monster of the week, but problem of the week. Police, firefighters, and medical personnel, they have to deal with this stuff every day. And so, yeah, it would be, we're doing our job, but make it interesting for the audience.
My suggestion for you would be, so rarely are all of those different emergency teams working on the exact same stuff at the exact same time, unless you mentioned there's a terrorist attack that kind of like forces them all to work together. Is that right? Right. So if maybe you have like a sort of big event per season, almost like 24. So for instance, the season 1 would be about the terrorist attack and the ramifications of that, and maybe successive attacks that follow up the first one. But in any case, it's about like this one incident that maybe takes place over a couple weeks even. That would sort of, by centralizing everyone around that event, it might allow your seasons to almost act as like anthologies that could be like years apart from each other in theory. But I think having that season event is going to be important for keeping all your characters in close proximity.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Unless I made that the central point is that they are all first responders. They all have that kind of job, and that's what brings them together. Is that they all have, even though it's different, they're still in that same sector, and that's what brings them together. Would that work?
Having a big crisis, I think, is important for this, because otherwise you're going to run into the Aquaman problem with the firefighters, where it's like, hey, Aquaman's here too. He's like, can I help, guys? And they're like, no, we're not in the ocean this time. We don't need your help, Aquaman. Oh, okay. Well, cool. I'll be here. If it's like, all right, guys, we need to get the team together. Oh, there's no fire, though, so you can stay home. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to run into that problem unless you have some unifying event that can force everyone to all contribute.
Well, what I was thinking is that each of the family members, they get their own arc that would intersect with one another because of the fact that they're family members and they all love each other, and maybe there's overlap between like the patient who's in the hospital and they're fighting for their life. Maybe they're a victim of crime, and the person in the and the police officer and the family is working to solve that crime. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you mean. Yeah, but for just in terms of getting all your characters on the same page and unified around the same goals, I think, because if they're in very different jobs, it'll be hard to keep them together. So you'll just probably want to pick events that keep them in as close proximity as you can. So just use that however you want. Try to find a way to do that. But the terrorist idea is a good angle for the first season.
Okay, because what I've been watching the procedural shows to try and get some idea of how to do this eventually, and what I felt like was that, okay, if you've got somebody in the family who's a firefighter, and maybe the spouse is a doctor or a paramedic, and they're probably going to intersect, and working on that same thing is what's going to bring them together, besides being a family member, and that could work. But I mean, would that work well?
Yes, I think the premise of your show works. You're just going to need to pick events that, I think we're just going in circles saying the same thing. That's okay. So yeah, the premise of the show works. Just try to align their goals as much as you can.
Okay, I really appreciate it, and I'm sorry I didn't mean to go in circles.
No problem. You're fine. Keep working on that one. I think you're really close.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. So we're in our last couple minutes, so I do want to just leave you guys with this recap of everything that's coming up. So next week is week 1, where we'll really focus on story engines. So you can take the advice you got this week and try to apply the feedback that you got, or you can also always just ask questions in the chat and get responses from other people besides me. My opinion is not the only one out there. There's plenty of other events that we have on Script Camp in order to get more feedback. We have script swaps, we have readings twice a week, or 3 times a week. Plenty of different things happening on Script Camp, Word Camp, and Game Camp currently. So here's our upcoming schedule, and if you have not yet signed up, you can do that at scriptcamp.net. Week 1 is also open to everybody, but if you'd like to persist all the way through the end, which wraps up around November 3rd, that's when you'll finish your full draft of your script. So you'll have to sign up if you'd like to be in all the classes. Just go to scriptcamp.net, sign up for unlimited membership. Go ahead.
Can I also plug Dakota and Charlie's mystery group that starts an hour before this started over on WordCamp every week. So if you're working on a mystery TV series, come along to that. They're amazing.
Thank you for that. And yes, that was Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. All right, we have 5 minutes left, so let's open the floor to any questions about what we discussed today.
Oh, something just occurred to me. Can you subvert any of these genres? And like if you brought like 1 or 2 together, like maybe you brought well, I know this has been done before, but supernatural and detective, I'm thinking like maybe kind of like psych, or maybe even well, no, that was a fake psychic, or maybe like supernatural, only the person actually is a real detective, they're not a monster hunter.
Sure, yeah, you can mix up the genres in any way you can think of.
I'd like to see like a noir, have that be a noir, although maybe supernatural is a kind of noir. I'm not too sure.
I could see a combination of supernatural and noir. That would be neat. There was a show called Carnival Row that was on Amazon that was kind of like that.
Oh, okay. I mean, I figured somebody had already done that, but I happen to
It's
like
kind
noir.
of, yeah, it's kind of steampunk, like Victorian gas lamp noir. It has that sort of spooky, 1800s London vibe to it.
Oh, that's kind of like The Mentalist.
Okay, cool. Let's open the floor to any last questions before we wrap up for today. Thank you for sharing that.
Can I share a TV show that I watched that I think is a good mystery?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm a bit out of the loop, but I did watch Lockwood & Co. based on a series of books by the guy who did the Bartimaeus series, Jonathan Stroud. And it's, yeah, I love them too. It's really interesting. I watched the TV series before I read the books. And they've put like the first 2 books into the first series. It was not only interesting in how it does mystery, but also how it does adaptation for anyone that's interested in both novels and TV shows / films and wants to see their work adapted. Yeah, so.
Great. And what's the central question in that show?
Because it's 2 books put into one, they try and create this central question of what is the skull that is whispering to Lucy, the main character, and that's the premise of the second book. But they include the murder mystery of the first book as almost this is the first case these guys are doing together. So the first 2 episodes covers that, but she sees the skull in the first book, and as the first episode, sorry, and then the last 4 or 5 episodes are all following this other mystery where she's being spoken to by this skull, and that's the whole second book. So it's kind of a little bit wishy-washy
Mhm.
because it's trying to put two books together into one story. So it did feel a bit to me like I was expecting it to go all the books and it'd be 2 episodes per book because it almost feels like it's the first 2 episodes of one story, who's this
it's not a
goes.
procedural, but it's the basic coming of age story almost. Like, will this girl survive and thrive? Basically, it boils down to.
Okay. Sounds cool. Sounds like it has some like thing of the week elements and some overarching longer, more difficult questions to resolve as well.
The
Can I
first
also add a
two,
mystery one after this? Yeah.
Becky, you can finish first, and then we'll hear Mario's recommendation.
I was going to say the first 2 episodes is one mystery, and then the rest of the episodes is another mystery.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Understood. Thank you. Go ahead, Mario.
So I would love to recommend the Acolyte. Got a central mystery of why the MC kills the like a Jedi. You know, she's going after the Jedi. It's it's not good. It's it's good to watch to know what not to do.
It's not
So
good.
it's great to hate watch.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mario, you said it's not a good show, but it's good to watch to find out what not to do. Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
because it's between that line of right below good and then it drops off. So like it's almost there. Like it has a really good first episode, a ton of money, a ton of talent, but it cheats. It cuts every single corner, and so when you cheat every single time, the subconscious audience picks up on every little thing and then gives up on you at episode 2 or 3 because they know that you're not paying attention. You know, you're writing. Oh, I need these characters to go here, and so we're here. It's like it's a lot of it's like every single mistake almost. You should watch it. You can spot it right away.
Yeah, I've got it on Disney Plus. I just haven't gotten there yet. But okay.
Thanks for that. Let's wrap up with our class today. So we will be back same time next week, 11 to 1 on Sundays for week 1 on the 22nd. And then our course goes all the way to our last class on October 27th, with the first draft completed by November 3rd. So about 6-7 weeks total, and you'll have that finished draft of a pilot. We hope to see you guys for the rest of these classes. But even if not, come join us on Script Camp if you haven't already. You can find the link to join us at scriptcamp.net. Just click the... Here, I already have it open. Just click the Discord button in the top right, and you can join our Discord server and access all of our member channels, discussions, workshops, genre groups, and events of all kinds. All right, thanks, guys. We hope to see you soon, and we'll be talking about lots more mystery writing tropes and techniques throughout the rest of this course.